The playlist, also has other ones. My second thing I want to say is that this is a Christian story, so if that is something you are not comfortable with, that is totally fine. You can click off, go watch a different video, and I hope to see you in another video soon. So, yeah. So here's the book. I literally had fake nails on for like a week. This is called 90 Minutes in Heaven by Dawn Piper, with Cecile Murphy. And it is a true story of death and life, it says. We have read, it's a pretty short book, and I have read, let's see, I guess 5 of the chapters. We are on chapter 6 now. Some of the chapters are really short, and some are more, I don't know, like regular. They're never too long, but I'm going to try and not read so fast. I am someone who just talks fast in general, talks fast, reads fast, whatever. So I'm gonna try and slow down. Sorry, I'm moving something. So I'm gonna try and slow down a little bit. So, yeah. And I don't have a very great vocabulary, so there may be words that I don't know, which, can be embarrassing sometimes, but that's just not my strong sense. Okay, so chapter 6, the recovery begins. So it starts with a verse. So this is the verse. And we can be confident that he will listen to us whenever we ask him for anything in line with his will. And if we know he is listening when we make our requests, we can be sure that he will give us what we ask for. 1 John 5:14 through 15. Now I'll start the chapter. Pain became my constant companion. For a long time, I would not know what it was like not to hurt all over my body. Despite that, within a few days of the accident, I began to realize how many miracles had occurred. I refer to them as miracles, although some may call them fortunate circumstances, because I believe there are no accidents or surprises with God. First, I wore my seatbelt. I shamefully admit that I had not bothered to wear one until I got ticketed. That morning, I had consciously belted myself in. Second, the accident happened on the bridge. What if it had happened on the open highway across the lake when I was headed toward the bridge? My car would have plunged down at least 30 feet into the lake, and I would have drowned. Third, I had no head injuries. Anyone who saw me or read the medical report said it was impossible that I suffered no brain damage. Eva still jokes that on occasion she's not so sure I didn't. Just as bewildering to all the medical people was that the accident affected none of my internal organs. That fact defied all medical explanation. Fourth, orthopedic surgeon Dr. Tom Grider, who was on duty at Herman Hospital that day, saved my leg. Dr. Grider just happened to be one of the few experts in the United States who deals with such bizarre trauma. He chose to use a fairly new experimental procedure, the Ilizarov frame. He performed the certain I would pull through the ordeal. A less skilled and less committed doctor might have amputated, assuming it wouldn't make much of a difference because I would die anyway. Fifth, people prayed for me. I have thousands of cards, letters, and prayergrams, many from people I don't know in places I've never been, who prayed for me because they had heard of the accident. I've since had people tell me that this experience changed their prayer lives and their belief in the power of prayer. On the night I entered Herman Trauma Center, I was in surgery for 11 hours. During that operation, I had the broken bone in my right leg set. My left forearm had to be stabilized because 2 inches of each bone were missing. My left leg was put into traction because 4.5 inches of femur were missing. During the operation, an air tube was mistakenly inserted into my stomach. This caused my stomach to inflate and my lungs to deflate. It would be several days before they discovered that this was the cause of the swelling in my stomach. Further complicating my breathing, I was unable to be elevated, and I developed pneumonia. I nearly died a second time. Because of many bruises and the severity of my obvious wounds, my doctors hardly knew where to start. Other less serious problems became obvious weeks later. Several years passed before they discovered a fractured pelvis that they had missed initially. I lay on my bed with needles everywhere, unable to move, dependent on the life support apparatus. I could barely see over the top of my oxygen mask. During most of those days in the ICU, I was in and out of consciousness. Sometimes I'd wake up and see people standing in front of my bed and would wonder, am I really here or am I just imagining this? Monitors surrounded me and a pulse oximeter on my finger tracked my oxygen level. Because I wasn't getting enough oxygen, the alarm went off often, bringing nurses racing into my room. The ICU in Herman is near the helipad. Helicopters took off and landed at all hours of the day. When I was awake, I felt as if I were in a Vietnam movie. There were no clocks in the room, so I had no concept of time. Other people lay in beds near me, often separated by nothing more than a curtain. More than once I awakened and saw orderlies carrying out a stretcher with a sheet over the body. As a pastor, I knew that many people don't leave the ICU alive. Am I next? I'd ask myself. Although I asked the question, the pain prevented my caring. I just wanted not to hurt, and dying would be a quick answer. I'd experienced heaven, returned to earth, and then suffered through the closest thing to hell on earth I ever want to face. It would be a long time before my condition or my attitude changed. Nightmare sounds filled the days and the nights. Moans, groans, yells, and screams frequently disrupted my rest and jerked me to consciousness. A nurse would come to my bed and ask, "Can I help you?" "What are you talking about?" I'd ask. Sometimes I'd just stare at her, unable to understand why she was asking. "You sounded like you're in great pain." "I am, I think," and then I'd ask, "How would you know that?" "You cried out." That's when I realized that sometimes the screams I heard came from me. Those groans or yells erupted when I did something as simple as trying to move my hand or my leg. Living in the ICU was horrible. They were doing the best they could, but the pain never let up. "God, is this what I came back for?" I cried out many times. "You brought me back to earth for this." My condition continued to deteriorate. I had to lie flat on my back because of the missing bone in my left leg. They never found the bone. Apparently, it was ejected from the car into the lake when my leg was crushed between the car seat and dashboard. Because of having to lie flat, my lungs filled with fluid. Still not realizing my lungs were collapsed, nurses and respiratory therapists tried to force me to breathe into a large plastic breathing device called a spirometer to improve my lung capacity. On my 6th day, I was so near death that the hospital called my family to come see me. I had developed double pneumonia, and they didn't she said. Without any hesitation, my friend canceled everything and jumped into his car. He drove nearly 200 miles to see me. The nursing staff allowed him into my room in ICU for only 5 minutes. Those minutes changed my life. I never made this decision consciously, but as I lay there with little hope of recovery, no one had suggested I'd ever be normal again. I didn't want to live. Not only did I face the ordeal of never-lessening pain, but I had been to heaven. I wanted to return to the glorious place of perfection. Take me back, God, I prayed. Please take me back. Memories filled my mind, and I yearned to stand at the gate once again. Please, God. God's answer to that prayer was no. When David entered my room, I was disoriented from the pain and the medication. I was so out of it that first I had to establish in my mind that he was real. Am I hallucinating this? I asked myself. Just then, David took my fingers, and I felt his touch. Yes, he was real. He clasped my fingers because that was all he could hold. I had so many IVs that my veins had collapsed. I had a trunk line that went into my chest and directly into my heart. I used to think of my many IVs as soldiers lined up. I even had IVs in the veins in the tops of my feet. I could look down and see them and realize they'd put needles in my feet because there was no place left on my body. You're going to make it, David said. You have to make it. You've made it this far. I don't have to make it. I'm not sure. I don't know if I want to make it. You have to. If not for yourself, then hold on for us. I'm out of gas, I said. I've done all I can. I've given it all I can. I don't have anything else to give. I paused and took several breaths because even to say 2 sentences sapped an immense amount of energy. You have to make it. We won't let you go. If I make it, it'll be because all of you want it. I don't want it. I'm tired. I fought all I can and I'm ready to die. Well, then you won't have to do a thing. We'll do it for you. Uncomprehending, I stared at the intensity on his face. We won't let you die. You understand that, Don? We won't let you give up. Just let me go. No, you're going to live. Do you hear that? You're going to live. We won't let you die. If I live, I finally said, it'll be because you want me to. We're going to pray, he said. Of course, I knew people had been praying already, but he added, we're going to pray all night. I'm going to call everybody I know who can pray. I want you to know that those of us who care for you are going to stay up all night in prayer for you. Okay. We're going to do this for you, Don. You don't have to do anything. I really didn't care whether they prayed or not. I hurt too badly. I didn't want to live. We're taking over from here. You don't have to do a thing, not a thing, to survive. All you have to do is just lie there and let it happen. We're going to pray you through this. He spoke quietly to me for what was probably a minute or two. I don't think I said anything more. The pain intensified, if that was possible, and I couldn't focus on anything else he said. We're going to take care of this. David kissed me on the forehead and left. An all-night prayer vigil ensued. That vigil marked a turning point in my treatment and another series of miracles. The pneumonia was gone the next day. They prayed it away, and the medical staff discovered the air with the breathing tube. On that 7th day, in another long surgery, Dr. Kreider installed the Ilizarov device so that I could sit up and receive breathing treatments. They also deflated my stomach, which allowed my lungs to inflate. Normally, hospitals require 6 months of counseling before they will authorize the use of an Ilizarov frame. In my case, the medical staff could give even no guarantee that the experimental procedure would work. They also told her that using the Ilizarov frame would cause me considerable physical pain as well as extraordinary emotional and physiological distress. No, let me reread that. They also told her that using the Ilizarov frame would cause me considerable physical pain as well as extraordinary emotional and psychological distress. Worse, they warned that even after going through all of that, I might still lose my leg. This is extremely painful and takes months, maybe years to recover, the surgeon said to Eva. Again, he reminded her of the worst that could happen, that I still might lose the leg. However, if we don't go this route, we have no choice but to amputate. He quietly explained that if they amputated, they would fit me with a prosthesis. Is that how another? I know it's talking about a prosthetic, but I didn't know it was called a prosthesis. And I'd have to learn to walk with it. Eva had no illusions about the extent of my injury or how long I would have to endure excruciating pain. She debated the pros and the cons for several minutes and prayed silently for guidance. I'll sign the consent form, she finally said. So, there's a picture, and it says, Don wearing the Ilizarov bone growth device. So there's the picture of him, and I think this is the device. Right there. The next morning, when I awakened after another 12 hours of surgery, I stared at what looked like a huge bulge under the covers where my left leg had been. When I uncovered myself, what I saw took my breath away. On my left leg was a massive stainless steel halo from my hip to just below my knee. A nurse came in and started moving around, doing things around my leg, but I wasn't sure what she did. I became aware of Eva sitting next to my bed. What is that? I asked. What's she doing? We need to talk about it, she said. It's what I agreed to yesterday. It's a bone growth device. We call it a fixator. It's the only chance for the doctors to save your left leg. She said, I believe it's worth the risk. I'm not sure I even responded. What was there to say? She had made the best decision she could and had been forced to make it alone. Just then, I spotted wires leading from the device. Are those wires going through my leg? Yes. I shook my head uncomprehendingly. They're going through my leg. It's a new technique. They're trying to save your leg. I didn't know enough to comment. I nodded and tried to relax. I believe it will work, she said. I hope she was right. Little did I know that nearly a year later, I would still be staring at it. And that's the end of that chapter. I'm going to take a drink. It's a ridiculous water bottle. I'm gonna see how long the next chapter is. Okay, I'll read one more. Chapter 7. Decisions and Challenges. Here is the verse. Can anyone ever separate us from Christ's love? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity, or are prosecuted, or are hungry, or cold, or in danger, or threatened with death? Romans 8:34-36. One of the most difficult things for me, aside from my own physical pain, was to see the reaction of my family members and close friends. My parents live in Louisiana, about 250 miles from Houston, but they arrived the day after my first surgery. My mother's a strong woman, and I always thought she could handle anything, but she walked into the ICU, stared at me, and then crumpled in a faint. Dad had to grab her and carry her out. Her collapse made me aware of how pitiful I looked. Most of those first days remain a blur to me. I wasn't sure if people really visited me or if I only hallucinated, and from what Eva and the nurses told me, I sometimes was delirious. The hospital allowed visitors to come in each day, a few at a time. Even when they said nothing, their sad, pitying eyes made it clear to me how they felt. I write clear to me because I know how I perceive them. In retrospect, I may have been mistaken. I suspect I was so positive I would die, and I wanted to, that I saw in their eyes what I was feeling about myself. Accurate or not, I felt as if they were staring at a mangled body and not a living person, that despite the assuring and comforting words they spoke, they expected me to die at any moment. I wondered if they would come to pay their last respects before I closed my eyes forever. Though my pneumonia was gone, we still had to treat its aftermath. Nurses came in every 4 hours for respiratory therapy treatments. They beat on my chest and forced me to breathe through a plastic mouthpiece, an awful smelling, terrible tasting stuff that was supposed to coat my lungs. This treatment would prevent the pneumonia from recurring and help restore my lungs. I'd wake up and see people coming in, and I'd think, oh no, here we go. They're going to make me breathe that stuff and pound on me and try to get the phlegm dislodged. As painful as they were, the treatments worked. Dr. Hawkins, the head of the Herman trauma team, came in several times a day. What Dr. Hawkins may have lacked in bedside manner, he made up in sheer bulldog determination not to lose any of his patients. He demanded that I breathe. Don't quit now, don't quit, keep trying. It wasn't just the words he spoke, but as sick as I was, I felt as if he fought right alongside me. Don't give up, keep trying. Often, I didn't have the energy to breathe and just stopped trying. I saw the pain expression on his face and then watched his features contour into an angry intensity. Did you hear what I said? Do it, now, breathe and cough, do it. I shook my head. I just didn't have the strength to do anything more. This is not negotiable. Do this right now. Breathe. I can't. All right. Don't do it. You're dead. You're going to die if you don't do it. Can you get that into your mind? I didn't want to live, but something happened when he yelled at me. I breathed. Shortly after that, the staff figured out how to elevate my legs so I could sit up. Just to sit up was a great step forward. I didn't think I'd ever get to lie on my side or stomach again. Once while I was still in the ICU, it seemed as if every time I opened my eyes and blinked, within seconds someone thrust a spoon filled with food about 6 inches from my mouth. Just open up. One time it was a man's voice. I opened my eyes and stared. Holding the spoon was a burly man. He lifted my oxygen mask and gently poked the spoon into my mouth. That's it. Just take a bite. I obeyed and swallowed while my drugged mind tried to figure out what was going on. Slowly I realized that the voice belonged to Stan Maldine, head football coach and athletic director at the Alvine High School Yellow Jackets. Our daughter would live with Stan and Suzanne and their 2 children during my convalescence. Coach Malden had heard that because I wouldn't eat, I was losing weight at an alarming rate. Although I had lost only a few pounds then, within the first 6 weeks in the hospital, I lost nearly 50 pounds. Wow, that's a lot. As soon as Stan heard about the situation, he made time in his demanding schedule to show up at Herman Hospital. He didn't just drop in to visit, he asked the nurse to give him my food, and then he sat beside my bed until I awakened. As soon as he realized I was awake, Stan shoveled in the food and talked while I did my best to chew and listen. That gentle act of sacrifice by a bear of a man was one of the most thoughtful acts I'd witnessed during my days of recovery. Stan epitomizes strength and tenderness combined in one exceptional person. I referred to the Ilizarov frame, which may have sounded like a common procedure. It was far from that. Eva had to make a decision no one should have to make alone. She had to decide whether to allow the then experimental Ilizarov process. Initially, this device was used to stretch legs. Its invention came about to help individuals who have a congenital condition where one leg is shorter than the other, some as much as 12 inches, and have to rely on wheelchairs, calipers, or crutches. The Ilizarov frame forces the bone in the leg to grow while keeping the surrounding tissue intact. The body can form new bone between gaps in response to the mechanical force of the Ilizarov frame. The Ilizarov bone growth device is what they call an external fixator. A Siberian doctor named Ilizarov invented it. Dr. Ilizarov devices anchored in the hip by rods about the size of pencils. The doctors drilled holes from 4 large rods from my groin to the side of my left hip. After they did that, I had at least 30 holes in my left leg. Many of them went completely through my leg and out the other side. The larger ones just went into the flesh, and rods were embedded in the pelvis. After about 6 months passed, I could actually see down inside my leg as the pinhole stretched out. Every day, someone would come in and turn the screws on the Ilizarov device to stretch the bones. Most of the time, the nursing staff took on this task. After I came home, Eva did it. For nearly a year, my left femur bone would regrow and replace the missing piece. It's an ingenious device, although terribly painful, requiring an arduous, lengthy recovery. I called it hideously wonderful. 6 rods also went through the top of my left arm and came out the other side. Big stainless steel bars were placed above and below the arm to stabilize it because both forearm bones were missing. The rods were the size of pencil and allowed Dr. Kreider to harvest bones from my right pelvis and place them in my left forearm. Oh, it's my dog snoring. The doctor explained that this was like taking core samples when drilling an oil well. They also harvested about 32 square inches of skin. From my right leg to place over the enormous wound in my left arm. Then they embedded a Teflon strip between the newly constructed bones and my forearm in order to prevent the new bones from adhering to each other, that is, attaching themselves and growing together. Unfortunately for me, that part of the technique didn't work. The bones healed, but they attached themselves to each other. Consequently, I have no pronation or supination in my left arm. My arm does not straighten out at the elbow, and I can't turn palms up or palms down. When I extend my arm, my hand is always in a hand-shaking position. My hand cannot twist either right or left. I know all this seems barbaric, and at the time it felt like it, but like the Ilizarov, it works. Yes, the Ilizarov device worked, and it was also the most painful process I endured as part of my recovery. The stainless steel Ilizarov on my leg weighed about 30 pounds, and the external fixator on my arm probably weighed another 20. Whether I was in my wheelchair, on my rolling walker, or eventually my crutches, I carried that extra weight around for nearly a year. Sorry. Can you imagine the strange stares I received everywhere I went? People gasped and gawked at a man in a wheelchair with steel rods sticking out all over his body. Virtually every time I made my routine visit to Dr. Kreider's office in my wheelchair, the reaction of the other patients was universal. Though each wore casts or braces or walked on crutches, all of them would stare at me in my rods and halos. Then, without fail, someone would say somewhat sardonically, "Wow," and I thought I was bad off. Occasionally, someone would even add, "After seeing you, I feel better." For a long time, I became the standard by which painful injury was judged. I often kidded others that because of all this metal work, if archaeologists discover my body years from now, they'll think they found a new species. My anatomy has been completely rearranged. Never again will I take simple physical ability for granted. During my recovery, even the tiniest movement was a miracle. Every time I relearned how to do something, it felt like an achievement. Only later did I understand how hard Dr. Kreider had worked to find a way to save my left leg and arm. I'll always be grateful that he didn't just give up on me. My right knee was crushed and I wore a cast on it for quite some time. They put a small mesh basket around the kneecap so it would heal. My right arm was the only limb that didn't break. Even with the success of the Ilizarov frame, however, the pain didn't leave, not for 1 minute. I wonder how many times I asked, "How long?" I wanted to know how long I'd have to endure the device, how long before I'd know if it worked, how long before I'd walk again. No one would, or could, give me an answer, but I kept asking anyway. A few months was the usual answer. How few, I persisted. One of the doctors finally said, "Many months, maybe longer." "You mean possibly a few years?" "Yes, perhaps years. And there's no guarantee that I'm going to be able these limbs. There's no guarantee. An infection could come on suddenly and we'd be forced to remove your leg. You mean I could endure this for months and still end up with no leg? He nodded. Obviously, that wasn't what I wanted to hear, even though Eva told me the same thing denial must have set in. I kept seeking a guarantee that I would fully recover. I wanted answers, but perhaps even more than that, I wanted assurance that I would be well. I wanted to be normal again. I wanted to be able to walk out of the hospital on my own 2 legs and go back to my former way of life. No one was willing or able to give me those assurances. Many months passed, but one day I did walk back into the hospital and hug all those nurses. During the months after I received the Ilizarov frame, I had other problems. I developed infections several times. Each time I faced the reality that it might rage through my body and I would wake up without my leg. I also had infections after they released me. 3 times I had to be rehospitalized, put in isolation, and receive massive amounts of antibiotics to cure the infections. Even then, many nights I prayed, God, take me back to heaven. I don't know why you brought me back to earth. Please don't leave me here. God's answer to that prayer was still no. I still don't know all the reasons, but in the months and years ahead, I slowly understood at least some of the reasons I had returned to earth. The healing process had begun. As I lay in that hospital bed day after day, I slowly acknowledged that God had sent me back to earth. I couldn't figure out why I had to endure the physical suffering, but I kept thinking of the words of David Gentiles. He and others had cried out in prayer for me to live. Because God had answered them, there had to be a purpose in my staying alive. Through days of intense agony, I would remember David's words. Sometimes the sense that God had a purpose in my being alive was all that kept me going. I was in Herman ICU for 12 days. Then I stayed 4 to 5 days in Herman Hospital before they transferred me to the street. They transferred me down the street to St. Luke's Hospital. Both hospitals are part of the world's largest medical center. I remained in St. Luke's for 105 days. Once I was home, I lay in bed for 13 months and endured 34 surgeries. Without question, I am still alive because people prayed for me, beginning with Dick, Anna Recker, and other people around the country, many of whom I've never met. That's perhaps the biggest miracle. People prayed and God honored their prayers. As I look back, I see how many people God used to save me. Dick Honorecker saved my life by his continued prayer. Dr. Kreider saved my leg and my arm and got me through that initial surgery. Dr. Hogan saved my life after the surgery because of his bulldog determination to keep me alive. The courageous nurses at the orthopedic floor at St. Luke's Hospital cared for me day and night. Each of them played a vital role. I attribute leaving ICU alive to the prayers of David Gentiles and the others. We're taking over from here. You don't have to do a thing to survive. We're going to pray you through this. I knew I wasn't going to die.